Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am reviewing another book for the Ellen Make Book Club, and that is The Mercies by Kiran Millwood Hargrave. Make sure you check out Ellen's channel where she picks a handful of books every month and people can read one or all of the books for the book club. Generally in my videos I try to stay spoiler free, but I will let you know right now this video is definitely going to have spoilers. So if you have not read this book and you want to, or if you are a person who does not like spoilers, this might be one you want to skip. I was trying to kind of write out some notes and some thoughts, and I couldn't figure out how to talk about some of these things without giving spoilers. So my book club discussion videos are going to be a little different than my typical review videos. I will have a brief synopsis, I will have a few of my personal thoughts, and then I'm mostly just going to jump into some of the discussion questions. A lot of them were posted over on Ellen's channel on her community tab. So the bulk of this video will be kind of answering those questions. When I started this book, I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't really know what it was about. I knew that it was about a community of women that somehow early on in the book, something happens to all of the men who live in the town, and so then it becomes a story about this community of women doing life together and learning how to survive on their own. It turns out this book takes place in 16th century Norway, and it is based somewhat on real events, historical events. In the very beginning of the book, there is a massive storm, and that storm takes the lives of almost all of the men from this village. It was primarily a fishing village, so all of the men were out trying to fish, and the storm capsized their boats. So now the town is left with only women, and these women have to deal with their grief, and they have to figure out quickly what they're going to do to survive and provide for themselves. Not only all of their own jobs that they had previously been doing for the town, but now also taking on the jobs that the men had done. After a few years of rebuilding themselves and the town, someone new comes to town, and that is a commissioner and his new wife. This commissioner is well renowned for being a very accomplished witch hunter. So when he gets to town, there starts to be more tension amongst the women there. There are the churchgoers, there are some women in the town who came from a neighboring town originally that have a reputation for having witchcraft in their town, and now they're just using some of their cultural traditions and trying to rebuild their lives after the storm. And he is trying to figure out who in this town might be a witch. This story has a lot of great themes. It talks a lot about community, about survival, about how people deal with tragedy and deal with grief. We have people dealing with grief with depression, with turning more strictly to religion, with turning more to their cultural roots. We have people learning new skills. We have people jumping straight into action. So that was a very fascinating look at grief and how people respond to it. It was very interesting as well, the themes of religion and how you have the commissioner's religion and what that looked like for him. You have the church-going women, and even within the group of women who go to church, there are kind of different pockets within that group as well. We have women who turn on each other. We have women who are embracing their cultural and traditional religion. It was very interesting and very thought-provoking all the way through. So for a little bit of my personal review, I enjoyed this book overall. I gave it 4 out of 5 bookmarks. At first, I was very surprised by the tone of the book. It felt very lyrical is the word that comes to mind. I'm not sure that's exactly the adjective I'm going for. So at first I was like, oh, this is going to be a tough read, but then I started getting into it and I really appreciated the way that it was written and the tone. The beginning also felt, or I guess maybe the first half, felt kind of drawn out. And then the second half, and especially the last quarter, felt a lot more rushed. I would have enjoyed more from that second half and from that last quarter. I feel like that's where a lot of the action, I guess, happened. So it would have been nice to kind of hear and understand more about that. But also, I find it fascinating because I feel like that's so much like real life. You just kind of go through real life, everything's normal, everything's normal, everything's normal, and then all of a sudden something happens that completely changes the trajectory, and then it can feel like life is going at a much faster pace. I think the way that it felt a little bit confusing, perhaps, made it actually feel more realistic. There are so many characters in this book that were just so nuanced and complicated and really made me think. For example, Marin's mother, who I cannot remember her name right now, the way that she handled her own grief in losing her husband and losing her son, her fear. I feel like she just had so much fear and grief and trauma, and the way, and understandably so, and the way that she processed and responded to that, the way that she ended up treating her daughter-in-law, the way that she ended up treating Marin, the way that she ended up treating the women from the church. I found her very interesting. I adored Kirsten, her power, her strength, her ability to become who she was meant to be and who she was meant to be in that moment and in that time. And I really liked Dina. I feel like she wasn't one of the primary characters, but I was just fascinated by her. My cat is messing with the trash can at the moment. Dickens, get out of there. He's not. He's going in further. Okay, I'm gonna jump into some of the discussion questions, and some of these, I think almost all of them are on the community tab on Ellen's page, so make sure you click through there. The first question, was the Mercies as atmospheric as you thought it would be given the time period and the landscape? So atmospheric is actually a great word to describe this book, and was it as atmospheric as I thought it would be? No, because I didn't really know what to expect, but atmospheric is a great description. I felt like I was really able to visualize what this town looked like and what the winter looked like, what their houses and fishing huts, rooms, houses looked like. And yeah, again, at first I didn't care for the writing style, but it totally makes sense after, like, especially after finishing it, for the story that the author was trying to convey and for the time period. Yeah, it was really good. Your favorite character and the one question you would like to ask them. This was hard. The first person I thought of was Kirsten, but honestly, there are so many characters in this book that I would love to sit down and talk with. I would have to say Kirsten, I think, is my favorite. She clearly was able to become more herself after the storm, and yet she also was dealing with grief, and seeing those two things being held together side by side in one person was very interesting to me. Just the way that she processed and dealt with her grief, the way that she stepped into action for herself, for living in line with who she was, for taking the steps needed for herself and for the other women to learn how to fish in order to get some fish to provide for their families. I don't know that I would have like one specific question I would want to ask her. I would just love to have a conversation with her, to talk to her about grief, to talk to her about authenticity, to talk about how she found the strength to keep going, how she found the strength to be true to herself, even in wearing trousers when she knew that she would be facing so much opposition from the people that she needed to help and the people that she needed to be able to rely on to help her too. I would be curious to know if she was the type of person who always, like, did she always want to try fishing? Did she always know that she was capable of that? It's just because of the society's roles that she had never gotten the opportunity to. Was she always the person that would have been more fulfilled by going out fishing than by staying home and baking the bread? And I would definitely want to talk to her about the ending of the book, which this part will be a massive spoiler. I know I already said there would be spoilers, but I would want to know if she felt the support from Marin, if she held it against Marin, if she felt abandoned, if she understood. So many heavy questions and heavy thoughts surrounding the ending of Kirsten's story. I also am very intrigued by Dina. I wonder, I don't know, maybe is she my favorite? No, Kirsten's my favorite character, but I did really like Dina. She's someone that I wish was more of a focal point of the story because, again, she's dealing with her own grief in her own way. She is one of the women who originally was from this other neighboring village that had more traditional religion and traditional ceremonies and practices that were being labeled witchcraft. So I would love to talk to her about how she was trying to still be true to her upbringing and to her religion and her culture, herself and for her son, how she was able to still have those things for herself, knowing that so many people in the town looked down on her and judged her and were scared of her and feared her, and just the strength that it would take to make the decision to to flee, to try to escape while she still could. The bravery, the courage, and the fact that this book doesn't necessarily give an ending for Dina. We don't actually know what happens to her. And normally I don't like that in a book. I would rather know for sure. And of course, I would rather everything be wrapped up with a nice neat bow. But even if things are not super happy, I would rather know what happens. But actually, the ambiguity in this book makes her story more compelling and more beautiful to me. And then this last person I thought of is not a favorite character by far, but I still want to talk to him, and that is the pastor, because I want to say to him, what are you thinking? And at the same time, thinking of it from a human reasoning standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, like I understand where he's coming from. I understand why he doesn't want to get involved, why he doesn't want to pick sides. He's scared for his own life. He's scared for his job. He has his own feelings and beliefs and convictions, but he is scared to voice them. And yet, that's the thing. So often, when we choose to not take sides, we're actually taking sides and we're actually taking a stance. And I'm curious what happens to him at the close of the book. Like, what is his next chapter? Does he end up speaking up? Does he end up taking a stand? Does he continue coasting by? That would be very interesting. That'd be very interesting to see his next chapter, the next part of his story. Next question. What are the mercies referred to in the title? So towards the end of the book, the pastor says in a sermon, I believe on a Sunday morning, something about the mercies God bestowed on you. So I think overall that's where the title comes from. But as I was thinking about the title in relation to the story, I was very intrigued because I could see the title referring to two things. The commissioner, whose name was Absalom, thought that he was kind of possibly the hand of God's mercies, that he was this person bringing God's mercy to this town by ridding the town of witches. Is it an ironic title referring to the mercies that Absalom is forcing upon the town, but it's not actual mercy to the town? Or is it more of a literal title? Are the mercies the small choices that the women had to make every day to survive? The choices that they made to show love and kindness to each other in the face of unimaginable grief? The way that they banded together for each other, for their community? Is it the way that Marin befriended Ursa, Absalom's wife, and the friendship that the two of them had was a mercy for each of them in different ways and for each of them together and their relationship? I think I like that latter explanation better, that the mercies were more so those small things that were the big things that made up the story, that made up the community. It actually reminds me of Frederick Bachman in Beartown, where he talked a lot in that book about how every small choice made is what builds a community. And I feel like that's what I think of in this book too. It's the small choices that created the community. So I would like to think that those were the mercies. This book was very interesting to me. It was definitely not really what I was expecting, but I ended up really liking it. It was very thought-provoking. I was going to say beautiful. It was beautiful, but in a very sad way, in a heavy way. I would definitely check trigger warnings about this book if you were interested in reading it. And I feel like it's one that, depending on the time or the season, like I may not have been able to read it. The timing worked out well for me this month, but I can definitely see, that it may not always be that case. So I'm glad that the timing worked out. I am glad that I read it. And yeah, it was a very thought-provoking read. If you've read this book, I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on it, either overall as a story, or if you have specific thoughts to answer some of these questions, I would love to hear it. Please let me know. And until next time, happy reading.